A school student carries a bag much heavier than anyone else's. Though it's not someone else's bag, his bag weighs 32 kilograms, leaving him drenched in sweat and out of breath every day. Two students noticed Ju-yun struggling and teased him, asking if he's carrying military equipment to school. Completely exhausted, Ju-yun pauses to catch his breath, his face dripping with sweat. One of the boys, a muscular student, offers to help carry Ju-yun's bag. Despite being tired, Ju-yun shakes his head and assures them that he doesn't need help. The two boys don't take no for an answer. While one holds Ju-yun back, the other grabs for the bag. The uglier student yanks Ju-yun's hair tightly, sneering that they'll return his bag soon enough. The moment the bag is removed from his body, Ju-yun's vision is overwhelmed by a barrage of strange, chaotic screens. Since a childhood accident, Ju-yun has been cursed with the ability to see internet data as if it were unfolding before him, filling his mind with unwanted noise. The flood of information makes Ju-yun's head pound, his stomach churn, and he feels like he's going to pass out. Just as he's about to collapse, the muscular student, unable to handle the bag's weight, tosses it back at Ju-yun. Clutching the bag once more, Ju-yun breathes a sigh of relief, his head clearing instantly. The bag contains a signal-blocking device that prevents the constant influx of internet data, allowing Ju-yun to function normally at school. Ju-yun is resting his head on his desk, with the bag placed securely beside him. With his headphones on, he scrolls through his playlist, trying to relax. A cheerful girl named Jo approaches Ju-yun, waving at him enthusiastically. Jo offers him a snack, thanking him for his earlier feedback and mentioning that she updated her thumbnail text based on his suggestion. Proudly, she shows Ju-yun her YouTube channel, claiming her views have skyrocketed. Unaware, her phone isn't connected to Wi-Fi. Realizing this, she checks her phone and frowns in disappointment, muttering that the Wi-Fi was working just moments ago. Ju-yun knows his backpack is the culprit, silently blocking the signal nearby. As Jo continues scrolling through her phone, she compliments Ju-yun on his sense of style, noting that he's always glued to YouTube. Ju-yun admits he spends a lot of time watching videos on NoTube. Jo tells him to join the broadcasting club if he's interested and walks away with a smile. Watching her leave, Ju-yun smiles but still feels utterly drained. Romance feels impossible to Ju-yun since he's disconnected from everything, including the internet. The only place he feels comfortable is at his part-time job with the excavator.at work. The loud noise from demolition blocks the flow of internet data, making the bag unnecessary. Ju-yun feels normal while operating heavy machinery, finding solace in the job despite the chaos around him. Two construction workers are watching, one calling Ju-yun a prodigy and wishing they could hire him full-time if he weren't in school. Their idle chatter is cut short by the captain, who scolds them to stop slacking and get back to work. Taking a sip from his drink, the captain admits that Ju-yun is incredibly talented for his age. Ju-yun works this job not only for the high hourly wage but also to test his unique ability. His ability doesn't just let him see and hear internet data, it allows him to use it under certain conditions. In simple terms, it's like watching a YouTube video and downloading its instructions directly into his mind. By focusing on a video, Ju-yun can replicate the skills shown in it, though currently, it's limited to operating excavators. After a long day of work, Ju-yun receives his paycheck in an envelope and thanks his captain. The captain casually asks Ju-yun how he's doing at school. Nervously, Ju-yun admits he's considering dropping out soon. Surprised, the captain asks why, and Ju-yun explains that he feels useful while operating machinery but useless at school. The captain advises him not to rush into decisions, emphasizing the importance of school life. Sighing, Ju-yun reluctantly agrees to think it over. Suddenly, the smell of smoke fills the air, and the captain notices a nearby building is on fire. Blowing his whistle, he shouts for the workers to call the fire department and grab extinguishers from the office. Staring at the flames, Ju-yun wonders why the demolition site has caught fire and is relieved that no one should be inside. However, his relief turns to horror when he realizes someone is trapped in the burning building. Panicked, Ju-yun rushes to the captain, demanding the key to the excavator. The captain, shocked, asks who's inside, but Ju Yun is already moving with the key in hand. A desperate cry for help echoes from a window, confirming someone's presence within. Moments later, the site is swarmed with bystanders and rescue workers, all watching the scene unfold. Meanwhile, Ju Yun climbs into the excavator and powers it up, ready to act. He drives the excavator toward the building, positioning it beneath the trapped person. Ju Yun quickly downloads excavator information from the internet into his mind, preparing for the rescue. The shovel attached to the excavator is misaligned, so Ju Yun begins adjusting it to face the correct direction. The captain watches in shock, unable to believe Ju Yun is fixing the shovel in such a dangerous situation. Once the shovel is properly aligned, Ju Yun steps out of the excavator, climbs into the shovel, and instructs the captain to lift it. Standing steady inside the shovel, Ju Yun rises as the captain lifts it, revealing a woman trapped inside the building. The woman clutches a baby in her arms and tearfully thanks Ju Yun for coming to save them. As Ju Yun gets a closer look at the mother and child, he's struck by PTSD, recalling his childhood accident. His mother, trapped in their car, had begged him to run and live while he cried, pleading for her to escape. A man had pulled young Ju Yun away just in time, before the car exploded into flames. Helpless, Ju Yun had been forced to watch the tragedy unfold. Now, seeing the mother cry for her baby, Ju Yun feels his emotions spike, and his head pounds with unbearable pain. Suddenly, the excavator begins to shake violently, almost throwing Ju Yun off balance. The captain, operating the excavator, looks confused as he tries to figure out why it's shaking despite the pain and chaos. Ju Yun focuses, determined not to let anyone die in front of him again. Clutching his head tightly, he instructs the mother to stay put as the baby's cries grow louder. Ju Yun keeps off the excavator's shovel and dives toward the window. Seeing this reckless act, the captain shouts at him, warning it's too dangerous. A burst of flames shoots out from the window as Ju Yun enters the building. The crowd below gasps in shock, their faces filled with fear and disbelief. Moments later, the mother jumps from the window and lands safely in the excavator's shovel. Once secure, she looks back anxiously, searching for her child. Thankfully, Ju Yun appears at the window, holding the crying baby and hands the child to its mother. The mother embraces her baby tightly, her relief palpable. With the mother and child safe, Ju Yun climbs onto the window's ledge, preparing to jump out. The captain yells at him to jump quickly. Ju Yun smiles, proud of his heroic effort to save lives. Suddenly, a massive explosion of flames erupts, hurling Ju Yun out of the window. Ju Yun begins falling rapidly toward the ground. Desperately, he reaches out and grabs the edge of the windowsill, stopping his fall momentarily. Using all his strength, Ju Yun clings to the sill, but the concrete he's holding suddenly cracks and crumbles. As the rubble collapses, Ju Yun plummets to the ground along with the debris. Like a bird without wings, Ju Yun begins to plummet, with nothing to grab or hold on to. He did everything he could, yet he doesn't understand why he's facing this cruel fate. All he ever wanted was a normal life, and now he's moments away from his end. The fall feels endless, but instead of hitting the ground, Ju Yun finds himself floating in a vast, dark, empty space. Unsure if he's dead, Ju Yun is suddenly blinded by a bright light that floods his vision. A massive screen materializes in front of him, and like a video, it begins to broadcast moments from Ju Yun's life. Puzzled and frustrated, Ju Yun watches the screen and shouts, demanding to know what's going on. A voice responds, startling Ju Yun as he realizes the system is talking to him. A strange creature appears on the screen, mocking Ju Yun and calling him dull-witted. Annoyed, Ju Yun glares at the system and demands it stop wasting his time and get to the point. Suddenly, a gigantic projection of a brain materializes in front of him. A sharp pain stabs through Ju Yun's head, and he grabs it with both hands, struggling to stay upright as the pain intensifies. Ju Yun collapses to his knees, feeling like his mind might shatter at any moment. The brain berates him for not using his abilities to their full potential, while Ju Yun curses it for causing him such unbearable pain. The brain announces it will share its strength with him and introduces itself as Stream, the last seat of Yggdrasil. Just as a lightning bolt strikes Ju-yun, everything goes black, and Ju-yun loses consciousness. Later, Ju-yun is found by rescuers under the rubble. After the bizarre experience, Ju-yun wakes up alive, and the doctors send him home, unable to find any injuries or damage. Still shaken, Ju-yun can't figure out what he went through or if it was real. However, a bigger problem looms as Ju-yun discovers his ability has changed and become even stranger. While still forced to carry the heavy signal-blocking device, he realizes he can now see videos, not just hear data or voices. When Ju-yun first regained consciousness in the hospital, he noticed strange floating screens hovering around everyone. A video of a heavy metal concert floated beside the nurse, an idle video hovered near a doctor, and a terrifying beast's video appeared next to a woman. Shaking his head in disbelief, Ju-yun assumed these must be the people's favorite no-tube videos. Now, Ju-yun arrives at his classroom, places his bag next to his desk, and takes deep breaths, exhausted. Sitting down, he lowers his head onto the desk, feeling completely uninterested in learning anything. The teacher walks into the room and instructs the students to take their seats. He then announces that a new student has transferred to their class. The teacher introduces the student, a girl named Minseo, and asks her to enter the room. A dude sitting in front of Ju-yun exclaims that Minseo is beautiful, clearly impressed by the new student. Meanwhile, Ju-yun notices a floating video player around Minseo, but this one displays an "access denied" message. Minseo glances directly at Ju-yun, leaving him nervous and even more confused about what is happening. Everyone watches NoTube. Some people watch training videos at home to learn yoga and other exercises. Others use NoTube to access educational videos for their college and school courses. And some people enjoy watching their favorite streamers live on NoTube. But Ju-yun is different. He can now automatically see everyone's NoTube videos, seemingly floating around them. However, Ju-yun isn't particularly interested in learning these details about others. The class president, who is solely focused on studies, seems to love watching dance videos. A friend Ju-yun isn't close with turns out to be a kendo fanatic, and a heavy-set student who never exercises surprisingly enjoys workout videos. Just like this, Ju-yun can see everyone's favorite NoTube videos, except for one person, Minseo. The new transfer student has her NoTube videos completely locked, and access to them is denied. The teacher instructs Minseo to introduce herself to the class, but instead of introducing herself, Minseo casually says she feels uncomfortable. The entire class is stunned upon hearing this. Even the teacher is shocked and asks Minseo what she means by that. Minseo forces a smile and clarifies that she didn't mean it in a negative way. She then points to her school uniform, claiming that it's stiff and uncomfortable to move in, which leaves the boys flustered. Only Ju-yun gets a strange, ominous feeling from Minseo. He doesn't understand why only Minseo's NoTube videos are showing error windows, while everyone else's are fine. As Ju-yun continues to watch Minseo, she suddenly stares back at him, her eyes momentarily blank with an eerie expression. Ju-yun is taken aback by the unsettling look. The girl sitting in front of Ju-yun assumes Minseo is looking at her and smiles hopefully, thinking she might like her. After an hour, the class ends, and while the other students head out for their break, Ju-yun stays at his desk, his head resting on it. He glances over at Minseo, who is surrounded by other curious girls, all eagerly questioning her. One girl touches Minseo's hair, commenting on how pretty it is. Minseo immediately slaps the girl's hand away, saying she doesn't feel comfortable. She warns the girls to stay away from her, mentioning that she's a bit sensitive. Right then, she notices Ju-yun and points at him, asking who he is. Yunji exclaims that Minseo is beautiful and suggests to Ju-yun that they should try to recruit her for the broadcasting club. Getting up at this suggestion, Ju-yun comments that Minseo seems a bit strange, but Yunji insists that Minseo isn't strange, she's just pretty. The girls, when asked about Ju-yun, tell Minseo not to pay him any attention and to give up on him. They warn her that Ju-yun is a total loner, always carrying a large bag around like a weirdo. Upon hearing about the bag, Minseo shows sudden interest. Meanwhile, Yunji pulls out her phone and shows Ju-yun a video of him saving a woman and her child from a fire. Yunji points out that the student in the video looks exactly like Ju-yun. Ju-yun stares at the video in shock, wondering if Mr. Kim recorded it. He quickly dismisses the thought, convincing Yunji that the student in the video isn't him. Nervously, Ju-yun starts sweating as Min-seo suddenly appears behind him and asks if he's the one in the video. Startled by her sudden appearance, Ju-yun spins around, alarmed. Min-seo asks why he looks so surprised. She points to a strand of hair on his shoulder and removes it, all while studying him closely. Then, she leans in closer to him and asks if he thought he could hide everything forever with a creepy smile. Min-seo tells Ju-yun to quietly follow her. Ju-yun is now terrified beyond belief, his face contorted in fear and drenched in sweat as Min-seo leaves the classroom carrying Ju-yun's bag. He instantly feels a sharp pain in his head as a rush of internet data floods his mind. In shock, Ju-yun notices that his bag is missing. Min-seo has taken it. Seeing Ju-yun twitching, Yunji asks if he's alright. Ju-yun tells her he'll be back and quickly leaves the classroom, his head still ringing and his vision blurry. Without the bag, struggling to walk down the hallway, everything around him seems distorted, floating as if he's in a daze. He reaches the computer room and enters to find Min-seo already inside, with his bag placed on the windowsill. Panting heavily, Ju-yun demands to know why she took his bag. Min-seo casually places a hand on the bag, telling him he'll have to carry something much heavier from now on, before pushing it out the window. Ju-yun watches in horror, unable to do anything but shout as his bag plummets to the ground. Suddenly, Ju-yun feels every ounce of internet information flooding into his body, causing his veins to throb painfully. Two guys are playing basketball on the playground when Ju-yun's bag crashes nearby, grabbing their attention. The device inside the bag is instantly destroyed. Shocked, the two guys look up at the building from where the bag fell. Meanwhile, back in the computer lab, Min-seo identifies that Ju-yun has a seed of Yggdrasil in his head. She explains that, according to the owner's desire, the seed reveals all truths the owner seeks as its function. If the owner desires it, the seed becomes a powerful weapon, and if the owner desires knowledge, it grants insight. If the owner desires authority, the seed becomes a crown and also grants infinite artistic abilities. However, once the seed fulfills its owner's desires, it devours that host completely. In the past, whenever the seed devoured its host, a catastrophe followed and struck the world. Hearing this, Ju-yun asks if that's the same seed inside his head. Min-seo tells him not to pretend he doesn't know, and claims she can see everything. Leaning closer to Ju-yun, making him look at her, Min-seo says that normally he would be classified as a target for elimination. However, she adds that this time the higher-ups have decided to give Ju-yun a second chance. Completely puzzled by all this, Ju-yun asks what she means by a chance. Reaching for a CD, Min-seo says that the chance is to see if Ju-yun is worthy, then snaps the CD in half, holding the other half like a knife. Min-seo charges at Ju-yun as if to stab him, swinging the sharp piece. She dashes past Ju-yun, cutting him across the chest. Seeing Ju-yun fail to dodge, she clicks her tongue in disappointment. Meanwhile, Ju-yun, who has no idea what's going on, asks Min-seo what the hell she's doing, but Min-seo lunges at him again, making 2 cuts on his arms, causing him to groan in pain. She slides backward, maintaining distance from Ju-yun. Finding her uniform uncomfortable for attacking, she removes it, revealing workout attire underneath. Seeing Min-seo get serious, Ju-yun raises a hand, asking her to wait. He points out that although he has strange abilities, none of them are suited for fighting. He reveals that all he's been able to do with his abilities is operate an excavator. Not believing Ju-yun's words, Min-seo charges at him again, demanding to see his true desire as she swings the sharp weapon at him. Ju-yun manages to dodge, leaving himself surprised, but Min-seo swings again, leaving a cut on his shoulder. Trying to defend himself, Ju-yun wonders if Min-seo is actually trying to kill him. Ready to attack again, Min-seo notes that she only knows how to kill and tells him to do something or risk dying. Wiping blood off his cheek, Ju-yun wonders what he can do against her. He kind of wants to run away through the open door. As if reading his mind, Mincio warns him that if he runs and gets caught, he'll be used as a lab rat for the rest of his life. Frustrated, Ju Yun shouts that he doesn't know what to do, explaining that he doesn't need the power of knowledge, just money from his excavator job. He bellows that all he wants is to live normally, like everyone else. Smirking at his desire for normalcy, Mincio makes it clear that it's impossible. She points out that with the power Ju Yun has, his greed will eventually overtake his emotions. Feeling frustrated, Ju Yun asks Mincio what she knows about him and tells her not to make assumptions so easily. He explains that because of his abilities, he's been carrying a 32 kilograms bag to school every day. He further adds that he hasn't made any friends and has been doing the excavator job just to barely make a living. His eyes widen and rage turns blue as his emotions get the better of him. The "access denied" screen next to Mincio shatters, sensing her guard being bypassed by Ju Yun. Mincio is taken aback. Ju Yun's rage continues to mount, his eyes glowing brighter as he lets off an evil, scary aura, his fist clenched. Mincio notes that Ju Yun is finally showing his true ability and asks what he will do if she doesn't let go of him. Seeing Mincio's stubbornness, Ju Yun can't believe it. With her defenses now broken, Ju Yun can see her favorite videos flickering around her. All these videos are related to combat fighting. Mincio charges at him once more, but this time Ju Yun is prepared and easily counters Mincio's attacks swiftly and decisively. Ju Yun grabs Mincio's arm, lifting her off the ground and sending her crashing to the floor with ease. Ju Yun feels a strange sensation. In the next moment, as he opens his eyes, he finds himself floating before a series of videos, all related to combat fighting. He recognizes that the videos are the same ones he saw around Mincio earlier. Suddenly, the videos start flooding into Ju Yun's mind as if he's sucking them in like a vacuum cleaner. He feels excruciating pain in his head and grits his teeth, trying to cope with it. The next moment, he finds himself back in reality, engaged in a fight with Mincio. Grinning at Ju Yun, Mincio says that it's nice to see him showing his true self. She raises her hand, grabs Ju Yun by his hair, and deadlocks his neck with both of her arms. But Ju Yun reacts quickly, pushing her back and sending her flying to the other side of the room, landing on her knees. Mincio acknowledges that Ju Yun is strong and claims she was planning to break his neck. Feeling his neck with his hand, Ju Yun now understands that Mincio is truly serious about ending him. As Mincio swings the knife at him, Ju Yun decides to focus on her movements. He quickly leaps aside, narrowly avoiding the knife swung at him. Thinking carefully, Ju Yun uses his left hand to stop Mincio from launching another attack at him. Seeing Ju Yun fight so well, Mincio is a little taken aback. Blocking more and more attacks, Ju Yun realizes he can't keep doing this forever, so he decides to counterattack. Clenching his other fist while blocking with the first, Ju Yun grabs Mincio by the shoulder and pushes her body down while thrusting his knee upward, landing an uppercut to her gut. After this successful attack, Ju Yun is surprised at himself for being able to use Krav Maga. Panting from exhaustion, Ju Yun asks Mincio if she's had enough and suggests they stop now. Her head bowed down, Mincio praises Ju Yun, saying he's doing better than she thought. Then, she grins evilly and says she isn't done yet. Charging at Ju Yun again, using a slide tackle, she knocks Ju Yun off balance, causing him to begin falling back. Ju Yun crashes to the floor with a loud bang. Mincio instantly follows up, raising a leg to crush Ju Yun's head. Seeing the attack, Ju Yun moves his head sideways, making Mincio's foot crush the floor instead. Mincio leans down and grabs a cable cord. Ju Yun requests Mincio to stop, claiming he has reached the end of his abilities. Mincio states that if Ju Yun is giving up so easily, it's better to die right now as she brands the cord with both hands and lunges at him. Feeling the cord wrapping around his neck, Ju Yun suddenly enters a trance. He communicates with his consciousness, trying to figure out what he can do now that he's cornered. Recalling the game of chase tag he used to play as a child, back in reality, Ju Yun makes a last-second split decision and propels himself forward like a bullet, avoiding being strangled. Seeing Ju Yun run like this, Mincio doesn't chase him instantly but notes that if he gets caught again, he will die like a flash. Ju Yun dashes through the corridor, blowing snacks, food, and clothes from the students there. A little further into the corridor, a guy is carrying a desk out of the classroom when he notices Ju Yun, but Ju Yun simply slides on the ground, avoiding colliding with the desk, and continues running. Right now, Ju Yun has nothing on his mind except that he needs to run as fast as he can away from Mincio. He hopes he's lost her when Mincio suddenly lunges at him from the front, cursing her. Ju Yun tilts his head sideways to avoid being grabbed. Chasing after Ju Yun up the stairs, Mincio reminds him that if he keeps running, he will live like a lab rat forever. Seeing how fast Mincio is, Ju Yun realizes he can't shake her off just by running, so he looks into the system to see if there are any useful videos but finds it empty. At this rate, Ju Yun fears he will be caught as he continues running. After a while, he comes across 2 doors and pushes them open. Once inside, he closes the doors shut and locks them from the inside. Drenched in sweat, he turns around and finds 3 guys in the corner, all smoking. For the first time in his life, Ju Yun is pleased to be in front of these bullies. As he apologizes to them with tearful eyes, seeing Ju Yun, the man with brown hair asks him what he's doing there. Ju Yun drops to his knees and apologizes to the bullies. The blonde bully, noticing Ju Yun staring at them, warns him not to do so if he doesn't want to die. Suddenly, Mincio kicks the door open with a powerful swing of her leg, startling Ju Yun. Ruffling her hair, Mincio steps inside, and the blonde bully, captivated by her, approaches her. Before he can react, Mincio delivers a quick kick to his chin, sending him crashing to the floor unconscious. Ju Yun and the 2 remaining bullies are stunned by the sudden attack. The leader of the bullies, fuming with anger, charges at Mincio along with the other bully, determined to avenge their fallen friend. But they are no match for Mincio, who easily punches both of them, sending them flying sideways. Turning to face Ju Yun, Mincio reminds him that she told him not to run away. She asks if he truly thought these bullies would save him from her. Ju Yun lies, claiming he never expected them to, adding that he just wanted to buy some time. He then says that he's just realized something, prompting Mincio to ask what it is. His eyes glowing, Ju Yun declares that after being chased by her, he remembered how much he wants to live. Desperately searching for more combat-related videos, Ju Yun begins downloading them into his mind, but the overwhelming flood of information causes veins to bulge on his face. The intense pain overwhelms him, and Ju Yun falls to his knees, scratching his head in frustration. Seeing his condition, Mincio assures him that she will end his misery quickly. She declares that it's the end for him and charges at Ju Yun, ready to finish him off. However, she stops and quickly raises her arms to block Ju Yun's kick aimed at her face. The force of the kick pushes Mincio slightly back. Without hesitation, Ju Yun wants another attack, but Mincio dodges it effortlessly. He continues attacking with relentless punches, but Mincio evades each one. He throws a final punch, but Mincio deflects it with a swift motion, redirecting it with a smack of her hand. Taking advantage of the opening, Mincio grabs Ju Yun by the neck, lifting him off his feet. She choke-slams him to the floor with a loud crash. Looking down at Ju Yun, Mincio taunts him, asking if that's all he's got. She raises her foot above his face and states that he's too weak to be of any use as a vessel. As she begins choking him with her leg, Ju Yun gasps for breath and asks her what she wants from him. Mincio demands that Ju Yun spit out the seed of Yggdrasil inside him. Desperate and on the brink of death, Ju Yun's raging emotions begin to take over his body. Meanwhile, down on the lower floors, the students notice a sudden darkness in the classroom as a power outage occurs. Yunji scowls, seeing that her smartphone has suddenly stopped working. Back on the rooftop, Ju Yun is still being choked by Mincio's foot pressing against his neck. But this time, Ju Yun is no longer the same. He has been overtaken by the seed of Yggdrasil. Lifting his leg, the seed of Yggdrasil kicks Mincio in the gut, sending her flying off her feet. The power of the kick sends Mincio sliding a few feet backward. She realizes that Ju Yun might have broken the vessel, noting the eerie smile on his face. Pointing his finger at Mincio, the seed of Yggdrasil causes a transformer in the power line behind her to explode. Smoke and fire erupt into the sky, and as the explosion intensifies, with the same creepy smile on his face, the seed of Yggdrasil comments that he's curious who is trying to end his meat shield, referring to Ju-yun, clenching her fists and ready to fight. Mincio dares the seed of Yggdrasil to come at her. In an instant, the seed of Yggdrasil disappears from sight and reappears right before Mincio. Raising one hand, he pulls back a finger as if holding a catapult and points it at Mincio's face. Releasing the finger, the seed of Yggdrasil generates such force that it sends Mincio flying backward. Mincio crashes to the ground a few feet away, but she quickly stands up, observing her still standing. The seed of Yggdrasil notes that she's no ordinary girl to withstand his attack. Excited to engage her. Further, the seed of Yggdrasil declares he will now use kicks and tells Mincio to block well. He propels himself toward Mincio, who raises her arms to shield herself. The force of the kick is so powerful that the shockwave sends the goalpost from the rooftop crashing to the ground below. Standing at the edge of the roof, the seed of Yggdrasil looks down at the destruction he has caused. A creepy grin spreads across his face as he watches Mincio, hanging from the side, holding on with just 4 fingers. The seed of Yggdrasil lifts his foot, ready to kick Mincio off the building and finish her off, but just before he can strike, the seed of Yggdrasil suddenly halts his leg midair as the real Ju-yun regains consciousness, fighting to take control of his body back. Ju-yun reminds the seed of Yggdrasil that he had promised to do anything asked of him. The seed of Yggdrasil asks what Ju-yun wants. In a desperate move, Ju-yun punches himself in the face with full force, shouting at the seed of Yggdrasil to get out of his head right now. Moments ago, when Ju-yun was overwhelmed by heavy emotions, his body became vulnerable to being possessed by the seed of Yggdrasil. The true consciousness of Ju-yun finds himself floating in an empty, dark space. He recognizes this place as the same one he visited last time when he was nearly crushed under the building. Looking around, Ju-yun wonders where the seed of Yggdrasil is hiding. Suddenly, he notices something on a screen. Getting startled, the figure on the screen is Ju-yun's own body, but possessed by the seed of Yggdrasil, who waves at him with a creepy smile. Realizing that his body is being controlled, Ju-yun curses angrily, demanding his body back. The seed of Yggdrasil confidently tells Ju-yun to watch closely and see the true strength of his body. Unintimidated, Ju-yun shouts at the seed of Yggdrasil to let him out immediately. The seed of Yggdrasil simply mocks him, daring Ju-yun to try and escape on his own, grinning as though it's all a joke. The seed of Yggdrasil gives a thumbs up and teases Ju-yun. Realizing he can't do anything but watch, Ju-yun falls silent, overcome with frustration. Ju-yun recalls how he used to carry the heavy bag every day, sitting alone in the classroom with no friends, but having his body taken over by someone else is crossing the line. Filled with rage, Ju-yun clenches his fists and thrusts them forward with all his might, trying to punch the screen before him. He repeats the action, landing several blows on the screen. However, his punches are futile. They don't damage the screen, and he collapses, drenched in sweat. Just then, another screen appears before him, startling him. Following the first, more screens appear, each showing online videos. Ju-yun realizes he can use his abilities here, after all. This realization fills him with a glimmer of hope. Determined to escape this nightmare, Ju-yun decides to do whatever it takes to break free. A larger screen appears with a video of punches, reminding Ju-yun how he had poured all his strength into his punches against Mincio back then. The punches weren't effective, but now he thinks he might be able to make them work. Clenching his fists, veins bulging in his arms, Ju-yun releases a powerful, deathly aura. He turns to face the screen and declares that he will try everything he can. Charging up a punch, he puts all his strength into it and thrusts it forward, demanding his body back. His punch strikes the screen with such force that it creates a hole in it. The entire screen shatters into countless pieces. Meanwhile, Mincio, who is hanging off the edge of the rooftop, pulls herself up and lands back on solid ground. She notices Ju-yun standing nearby, his back turned to her. Leaning down, she picks up a wire cord, contemplating ending Ju-yun. Suddenly, Ju-yun starts yelling loudly, demanding the seed of Yggdrasil get out of his head. Mincio is shocked, as she knows the seed of Yggdrasil never allows a host to regain their sanity once it takes control. But judging by Ju Yun's actions, it seems like he's regained his sanity. Grabbing his arm with his other hand, Ju Yun curses the seed of Yggdrasil, ordering it to return where it came from. In the next moment, the seed of Yggdrasil takes control of Ju Yun's body again, and, with the same creepy grin, tells Ju Yun to accept him. But Ju Yun quickly forces the seed of Yggdrasil out again, and regains control of his body. Slapping his face while Ju Yun is distracted, Mincio moves in and wraps the wire cord around his neck from behind. She declares that Ju Yun has failed and now he will die. However, Ju Yun tells Mincio to wait and assures her that he has regained control of his senses. Rethinking her decision, Mincio reluctantly releases the wire, cursing under her breath. She pulls out her earpiece and speaks into it, ordering the Alpha team to proceed. Following her command, masked soldiers armed with guns arrive and aim them at Ju Yun. Ju Yun is puzzled, unsure of what is happening. A soldier asks if they should kill Ju Yun, prompting Ju Yun to shout that he won't let anyone kill him. With a sigh, Mincio declares that they will take Ju Yun alive to the Scallop's headquarters. Repeated warnings echo through the system as a man in a lab coat anxiously tries to assess the situation. The man looks stressed, unsure of the unknown error that has occurred. The alarm blares loudly behind him, causing the man to spin around. The system announces an emergency as a computer short circuit catches fire, filling the facility with smoke. After a tense moment, 2 employees in safety gear manage to extinguish the fire. The conclusion of the incident is clear. The target is inside Ju Yun's head. One of the men asks if they are dealing with a monster, but Ju Yun, still tied to a chair, responds that he is a high school student, not a monster. The 2 men remain silent, unsure how to react to Ju Yun's words. Meanwhile, in the main control room, a researcher approaches the director holding a stack of important documents. The researcher examines the report and informs the director that they've detected anomalies in Ju Yun's brain. At this moment, in a different room, a man is watching Ju Yun through a screen and turns to Mincio, telling her that she's caught a big fish. The man is Min Du-Hu, the director of Scallop's headquarters. Rising from his seat, Min Du-Hu asks Mincio why she didn't report Ju Yun sooner. After a moment of thought, Mincio replies that she saw finding Ju Yun as her own little secret, like a cafe she wanted to keep to herself. Min Du-Hu, unsure whether Mincio is serious or joking, decides to set the discussion aside and asks her to bring something out. Mincio removes her lenses and hands them to Min Du-Hu. Min Du-Hu attaches the lenses to a VR set and puts it on his head. However, upon seeing what the lenses reveal, his face contorts in horror, and he quickly removes the VR headset. He points out that it does have the feel of a cafe you'd want to keep to yourself. Sighing, Mincio mentions that while the coffee was good, the owner just wasn't it. Min Du-Hu asks her what kind of owner she means. Mincio admits she's not entirely sure, adding that the other owner who comes out sometimes is someone she never wants to meet again. Min Du-Hu asks if she's giving up, and Mincio explains that she's not good at tolerating things that make her uncomfortable. Raising a finger, Min Du-Hu asks what they will do about the seed. Mincio explains that the seed grows by consuming desire, and since Ju Yun has no such desires, she thinks it might disappear over time if left alone. She also suggests they can simply transplant it if it turns out to be dangerous. Min Du-Hu asks if Mincio knows the difference between a hero and a villain, explaining that education is the key factor that sets them apart. He adds that anyone can be violent and proactive, but if properly nurtured, it has endless potential. Mincio is surprised to hear this from Min Du-Hu. Meanwhile, Ju Yun is being escorted by 2 researchers. Ju Yun asks where he's being taken and if it's for them to remove his brain or something. The researcher with parted hair snaps at Ju Yun to be quiet, reminding him of how many machines he broke today. After a while, they arrive outside a guarded area, and the researcher shows the guard a card, stating they're there by the director's orders. The door slides open, and the researcher tells Ju Yun to go inside. Upon entering, Ju Yun faces Mincio and Min Du-Hu. Seeing Mincio, A muscle twitches in Ju Yun's face as he remembers everything happening to him is because of her. Noticing Ju Yun glaring at Minseo, Min Du-hoo tells him not to stare at her. Extending his arm for a shake, he introduces himself. Seeing that Ju Yun's hands are tied, Min Du-hoo laughs and says he'll free Ju Yun right now as he removes the bindings. Min Du-hoo apologizes, explaining they were simply following procedure. Once Ju Yun's hands are freed, Min Du-hoo asks him to take a seat. With Ju Yun seated, Min Du-hoo takes his own seat, clears his throat, and suggests they start the interview. The first question is about Ju Yun's father's details, but Ju Yun doesn't respond. Seeing Ju Yun silent, Min Du-hoo says it doesn't matter and claims he has the gun of truth, making a gun gesture with his fingers. Min Du-hoo says it might sting a little as he points his fingers at Ju Yun. Then he shoots an energy force field that hits Ju Yun in the face, sending him flying backward after firing at Jan. Mahan explains that what he shot was the bullet of truth. He points his fingers at Jan once again, energy crackling around them, and assures him that it won't hurt, claiming he will only unlock Jan's memories. Min Dun releases an electric charge aimed directly at him. However, the shockwave from the attack unexpectedly backfires, pushing Min Dun backward. Clutching his trembling hand with the other, Min Dun looks confused, unsure of what just happened. Meanwhile, Jan finds himself standing on his feet, completely disoriented. Turning around, he notices his real body slumped against the wall, seemingly unconscious. Jan suddenly realizes that his consciousness has been separated from his body, and an invisible force presses down on him. His feet sink into a strange liquid, and as he passes through it, he finds himself falling through an open sky. He continues to descend, with the vast expanse of the clear blue ocean stretching out below him. With a loud splash, Jan plunges into the icy seawater, slowly sinking toward the seabed. Desperately, he raises his hand, struggling to break free from the dimly lit surface above. Moments later, he finally manages to push his head out of the water, coughing violently and expelling large amounts of seawater. Spotting a tube floating nearby, he grabs onto it, gasping for air and panting heavily. Something to his left catches his attention, and as he turns his head, he sees a large play button-like object glowing and rising into the sky like the sun. All of this is happening to Jan's consciousness while his real body remains slumped in the lab. Unconscious. Minduan's fingers are severely burned from the shot he fired at January. Mina helps him stand, noticing how drained he looks after using such a terrifying technique. Mindun mentions that his technique borrowed 10% of South Korea's total power supply. This power surge has caused blackouts, leaving several cities in darkness. People resort to using their phones for light as authorities issue instructions for everyone to return home immediately. Some people, however, appear visibly annoyed by the sudden power outage. Back at the lab, Mina questions Mindun, asking if using the technique was truly worth it. Mindun replies that everything now depends on Jan himself. Meanwhile, Jan stares at the glowing play button, recognizing its resemblance to NoTube's logo. Memories of his recent struggles flood his mind, and an intense rage consumes him as he blames the seed of Yggdrasil for everything. The tube vanishes, and Jan finds himself floating on his back in the water, strangely feeling at ease. Nearby, a massive wave begins forming, but with his eyes closed, Jan remains unaware, simply enjoying the calm. The wave grows higher and higher, towering tens of feet above Jan like a waterfall. The wave crashes down, plunging Jan deep beneath the water's surface. The scene abruptly shifts, and Jan suddenly finds himself back in his childhood classroom, standing as a child in front of the class. The teacher instructs Jan to share what he did during his vacation with his classmates. Smiling, Jan proudly tells the class that he learned how to surf and rode a banana boat. One of his friends questions why Jan's skin hasn't tanned at all if he truly went surfing. This comment wipes the smile off Jan's face, leaving him visibly nervous. The other children start doubting whether Jan really went to the sea, given his pale skin. Hearing their disbelief, Jan lowers his head in silence, unable to respond. After school, Jan sits in a car heading home as the family driver asks if he had a good day. Distracted by a vlog on his phone, Jan mutters that it wasn't fun. The driver asks if something happened, and Jan, putting his phone aside, inquires why skin tans when people go to the sea. The driver then asks Jan if he has ever been to the sea before. Jan admits that he hasn't, as his parents are always too busy. The driver sighs, lamenting how Jan's father is irresponsible for not making time for him. He then explains that when people go to the sea, their skin tans, much like how a snake sheds its outer layer of skin. Curious, Jan asks if tanning is a good thing, to which the driver, with a creepy smile, affirms that it is. Suddenly, the driver turns to face Jan, revealing himself to be the seed of Yggdrasil, shocking Jan beyond belief. Suddenly, rain pours down, soaking the area as dark clouds obscure the sky, with the faint outline of the no tube button visible. Jan remains submerged while the tube floats serenely on the surface. Moments earlier, the calm sea had started to sway, and within minutes, a storm overtook the tranquil waters, turning them violently rough. However, just as quickly as it arrived, the storm vanishes, leaving the sea calm. Meanwhile, Mindun turns on a record player, and the soft melody of a lullaby fills the room. Confused by this, Mina questions Mindun, asking why he's playing music in such a serious situation. Mindun explains that in times of turmoil, nothing is more soothing than a melodious lullaby. He elaborates that every lullaby carries the same wish. Sleep well, grimly adding, the world is hell, while watching Jan's leg twitch faintly. Mina remarks that everyone possessed by the seed of Yggdrasil has caused chaos, speculating that Jan might do the same. At that moment, a researcher rushes into the room holding a report and urgently calls out for Mindun. Mindun takes the report and schemes through it, discovering from the MRI scan that there is a chip implanted in Jan's brain. Back in Jan's memory, the car he is riding in continues driving him home. The seed of Yggdrasil calmly explains to Jan that going to the beach leads to sunburn, much like a snake shedding its skin. Jan hesitantly asks if that's a good thing, and the seed of Yggdrasil, turning to face him with a menacing grin, affirms that it is. The unsettling expression startles Jan, making him recoil slightly. The seed of Yggdrasil leaves its seat and walks toward Jan, extending a hand toward his face. Clasping its hand over Jan's mouth, the seed of Yggdrasil asks if he remembers that this moment was the beginning of everything. It declares that Jan will never forget the first day of his 5th grade. The seed of Yggdrasil reveals that it was the very day when Jan and his mother were involved in a tragic accident. A bus had come out of nowhere and before Jan's eyes collided head-on with their car. The sudden jolt of this memory pulls Jan back to the sea, sinking ever deeper into the ocean bed. Mindun had sent Jan to uncover the truth, but so far he has only faced his most humiliating and painful memories. The tube continues to float on the peaceful surface of the sea until suddenly, Jan bursts out of the water, gasping for air. Grabbing the tube for support, he coughs and sputters, trying to expel the water from his lungs. Shaking his head in frustration, Jan angrily demands to know where he is and what this strange place is. Suddenly, the seed of Yggdrasil emerges from the water before him, mocking Jan by asking if all he craves is attention. Floating effortlessly into the air, the seed of Yggdrasil laughs at Jan, who shouts at it to shut up. The seed of Yggdrasil smirks and continues taunting him, repeating its accusation that Jan is just an attention seeker. Enraged, Jan curses the seed of Yggdrasil and demands to know if it invaded his mind during the accident. Hovering high above, the seed of Yggdrasil nonchalantly replies that when it invaded Jan's mind isn't important. Raising a finger, it adds that the more significant question is why. With a mocking gesture, the seed of Yggdrasil pinches its nose and dives back into the sea, leaving Jan shouting after it, demanding answers. Slamming his palm into the water in frustration, Jan growls, still clueless about what truth he's supposed to uncover. Looking up at the no-tube symbol shining brilliantly like the sun, Jan wonders if the truth is somehow connected to it. Thoughts of the sun, sunburn, and his past shedding away like old skins swirl chaotically in his mind. He struggles to recall the events following the accident and remembers that he didn't wake up for an entire year. Just then, another massive wave crashes down on Jan, forcing him underwater once more. The reality is that after the accident, Jan fell into a coma and remained in a brain-dead state for 90 days before being transferred to a research facility. The head doctor sought approval from Jan's guardians, while the seed of Yggdrasil deceitfully claimed his parents had already consented. With that confirmation, the doctor started the experiment on January. Jan vividly remembers opening his eyes after the accident, his head throbbing, his body overwhelmed by nausea and dizziness, yet feeling strangely warm. As soon as he regained consciousness, a group of overenthusiastic doctors surrounded him, offering cheerful welcomes that marked the beginning of everything that followed. The doctors bombarded Jan with questions, asking if he felt any discomfort and urging him to share any concerns. However, Jan remained silent, prompting one of the doctors to suggest they start their process from scratch. They began teaching Jan how to walk properly, ensuring his movements appeared natural. They trained him to speak fluently, focusing on eliminating any slurring or unclear pronunciation. Jan was even taught how to smile naturally, as though his emotions were being reconstructed. From nothing, it felt as if he was being reprogrammed, like a newborn learning the basic aspects of human behavior. One day, while eating lunch, Jan glanced at a nearby TV screen and saw a video depicting a skeleton. The video detailed how brain-dead patients could be saved by implanting computer chips in their brains. It dawned on Jan that this was precisely what had been done to him. A chip had been implanted in his brain. Back in the present, the researcher, Mina, and Mindan are all stunned by the discovery of the chip in Jan's brain. Mina expresses disbelief, asking how it can be a chip and not a seed of Yggdrasil. The baffled researcher admits he has never seen anything like it before. Mindan, deep in thought, speculates whether they are mistaken or if those who implanted the chip replicated the seed of Yggdrasil's properties. A sudden realization strikes him, and he declares that they need to wake Jan immediately. In a hurried tone, he asks if the necessary power supply is ready, to which the researcher confirms it is fully charged. Meanwhile, in Jan's memory, he is running on a treadmill as part of his rehabilitation process. After powering off the treadmill, the head doctor suggests that it is time for Jan to undertake the final test. Drenched in sweat, Jan asks if passing the test means he can leave. The doctor assures him that he can, provided he succeeds in the test. Jan eagerly asks if he will be able to see his parents again, and the doctor promises he will. A wide smile of excitement spreads across Jan's face as he hears the doctor's words. Patting Jan's shoulder, the doctor encourages him to give his best effort during the final test. The doctor leads Jan to a room filled with an intricate network of machinery, a place that feels overwhelmingly advanced and alien. Jan sits down as researchers place a helmet bristling with wires onto his head. Confused by the setup, Jan hesitates before asking what is happening. In front of him stands a massive glass tube housing what the doctor refers to as a sleeping god. The doctor explains that they are about to awaken this god and, in doing so, ascend to godhood themselves. With a confident gesture, he signals the researchers to begin their plan. Pressing buttons, the doctor asks Jan what he plans to do once he wakes up. Jan replies that he will go to the sea with his parents. Smiling sinisterly, the doctor assures Jan that his wish will indeed come true. With that, he presses a red button, sending a surge of electricity coursing through Jan's body. Jan screams in agony as the electricity flows through his veins, his body convulsing violently. Although this memory belongs to the past, it begins affecting Jan's real body in the present, causing him to twitch uncontrollably. Minun, pointing at Jan, explains that truth exists in 3 stages, one rooted in experience, another reconstructed by memory, and the last intertwined with lies. Lowering his electricity-charged finger to Jan's forehead, Mindan asserts that the path to truth requires digging deeper. Just as his finger brushes against Jan's forehead, Jan's eyes snap open. A surge of energy ripples through Jan's mind, shattering his memory while chaos erupts in the mental sea as colossal fingers descend from the parted clouds above. Minduan's finger descends from the sky, heading straight for the turbulent, stormy SEA.I in the classroom where Jan once lied about going to the sea. Another massive finger crashes through the ceiling, disrupting the room. At the facility where Jan underwent his final test, yet another finger appears, breaking through the structure. Controlling these immense fingers, Mindun demands the seed of Yggdrasil reveal itself. With his fingers tearing through the ceilings and walls, Mindun intensifies his search for the seed of Yggdrasil. Meanwhile, the seed of Yggdrasil has captured a doctor and is mercilessly torturing him. The seed of Yggdrasil pierces one of the doctor's eyes, prompting a gut-wrenching scream of pain. Releasing the doctor, who collapses to his knees, the seed of Yggdrasil grins wickedly and remarks how much he's enjoying this chaos. Suddenly, something slams into the seed of Yggdrasil, forcing him to leap back. He retaliates by stomping on Mindun's fingers. Back at the lab, Mindun winces in pain but assures Mina he's fine and instructs the team to continue. The researcher shouts into the walkie-talkie, ordering the machine team to initiate the operation and draw 10% of South Korea's power. Responding to the orders, the machine team channels the energy, which Mindun struggles to contain as he directs it through his fingers. The seed of Yggdrasil muses aloud, questioning when human desires reach their peak and if they are ever truly satisfied. He wonders whether desires end with wealth, love, or success, or if they always continue to grow. Striding confidently, the seed of Yggdrasil approaches the large glass tube that had recently imprisoned him. Placing his hands against the tube, he murmurs cryptically about the true nature of human desires. Turning around with glowing, ominous eyes, the seed of Yggdrasil declares his intent to become a god, using Jan's body as an eternal god. Back in the lab, Mindun channels another 10% of South Korea's power into the gun of truth and presses his electrified finger against Jan's forehead, holding his position. Mindun mocks the seed of Yggdrasil, accusing him of being all talk and preying on the desires of others. The seed of Yggdrasil, clutching his wounded eye from the gun of truth, bursts into laughter and dismisses Mindun's words as nonsense. However, his laughter halts as he spots Jan walking toward him, glaring with anger and demanding that the seed of Yggdrasil leave his mind. Jan appears furious, with no intention of tolerating the seed of Yggdrasil any longer. Mindun's electrified finger descends once more, this time aimed directly at the seed of Yggdrasil. Like a magnet, the seed of Yggdrasil is forcibly pulled toward the finger. Finally, the seed of Yggdrasil is extracted from Jan's head and appears in the real world, where Mindun captures it in his hand. Holding the seed of Yggdrasil close, Mindun sternly tells it to listen carefully from now on. Observing the seed of Yggdrasil, the researcher notes its unusually small size and suggests it may have been tampered with. Mindun agrees, suspecting someone had interfered with the seed of Yggdrasil's original form. Just then, Jan awakens and anxiously asks if he has killed anyone. Rising slowly, he repeats the question, his voice filled with worry. Kneeling beside him, Mindun reassures Jan that most of the memories he saw were fabricated by the seed of Yggdrasil. Frustrated, Jan asks what is real and what is a lie. Mindun replies that only the people who implanted the seed of Yggdrasil can answer that question. The researcher urgently reminds Mindun to hurry, warning that the power supply is nearly depleted. Mindun considers their options, noting that the simplest solution is to destroy the seed of Yggdrasil entirely. However, he cautions that doing so could render Jan brain-dead once again. Alternatively, Mindun suggests Jan could accept the seed of Yggdrasil and learn to control it. Presenting these choices, Mindun asks Jan to decide. To everyone's surprise, Jan asks for the seed of Yggdrasil, stating that he wants it back. Reaching out his hand, Jan asserts that since the seed of Yggdrasil came from his head, it belongs to him. Reluctantly, Mindun hands the seed of Yggdrasil over, warning Jan to handle it with care. Holding the seed of Yggdrasil, Jan stares at it accusingly, blaming it for all the pain it has caused him. Turning to Mindun, Jan firmly asks how he can learn to control the seed of Yggdrasil. The seed of Yggdrasil are relics deeply tied to the creation of the world. Throughout human history, whenever a seed of Yggdrasil has sprouted, it has significantly altered the course of events. Those chosen by the seed of Yggdrasil become key holders to determining the future of the world. However, there exists a group that intercepted one of these seeds of Yggdrasil and developed an entirely different approach. Their unique approach stems from their goal of replicating the seed of Yggdrasil instead of relying on its natural course. After extensive research, they managed to manipulate the seed of Yggdrasil successfully, altering and replicating it. They handpicked their own key holders, combining the transcendent power of the relic with advanced scientific technology to create January. Now that Jan is in their care, their top priority is to educate and protect him for the sake of humanity's future. Others within the organization are displeased with Minduin's decision to keep Jan alive, especially a sinister-looking woman. The next morning, Jan notices someone in a peculiar suit kneeling and praying fervently to God. Taking a seat on the sofa, Jan asks the stranger, slightly puzzled, who they are. The figure introduces herself as Chief Researcher Song Kami, claiming she will be responsible for Jan's care. Hearing her refer to him as No-Tube Man, Jan asks what she means by that. Leaning closer, Song Kami explains that it's his nickname since he downloads No-Tube videos to defeat villains. She bombards Jan with a rapid series of questions, her excited chatter making him visibly uneasy. Just then, footsteps echo in the room, and Mindun enters, commenting on Song Kami's unusual outfit. Song Kami begins to explain her attire, but Mindun dismisses her, calling her crazy. Offended, Song Kami tries to argue, but Mindun interrupts, calling her a two-faced torturer. With a proud smile, Song Kami retorts that she was the one who successfully reimplanted the seed of Yggdrasil into Jan's head. She declares that she prefers to be called a nerd scientist, emphasizing her expertise. She also reminds them that it was Jan himself who asked to be taught how to control the seed of Yggdrasil. Jan confirms this, stating that he doesn't want to die yet, as he still has many things to do. Song Kami suggests they start by teaching Jan how to activate and deactivate the seed, followed by how to nurture it properly. Mindun pulls the chip from his pocket, handing it to Jan, and explains that it contains information about those who tampered with his mind. Jan examines the chip and reads the label. Niak connecting. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the lead doctor involved in Jan's operation is giving a speech to a room full of reporters. A female reporter asks what his next move will be. The doctor smiles and says he's been contemplating his next steps, revealing that all his ideas lead to a single goal: creating a human beyond the limitations of ordinary humans. Gesturing to his legs, he explains that these enhanced humans will have superior limbs and increased lung capacity. He adds that their intelligence will surpass that of regular people. Finally, he declares his plan to create a superhuman, leaving the reporters in an uproar. They rise from their seats, bombarding the doctor with questions. One male reporter accuses the doctor of making an announcement without tangible results, but the doctor denies it. Wrapping up, the doctor thanks the reporters and exits the stage. As he descends the stairs, an associate informs him that they have located the vessel. January, hearing this, the doctor flashes a sinister smile, expressing his delight. A month later, Song Kami arrives outside Jan's door, calling out to him and reminding him that school starts today. Inside the room is a chaotic mess, littered with trash and empty snack packages. Startled by her call, Jan snaps out of his daze, realizing he's been watching No-Tube nonstop, accumulating 432 hours of watch time. Turning around, he complains of dizziness, clearly overwhelmed by his binge. Meanwhile, a chef carefully peels small round fruits and skewers them onto a sharp stick, resembling a kebab. He dips the fruits into a sugary solution, coating them evenly for a glossy finish, before handing the stick to a bulky man who asks Song Kami if the fruits are truly delicious. She affirms, and the man takes a bite, exclaiming in delight and thoroughly enjoying their sweetness. After devouring the rest, he comments that the experience was deeply satisfying. He then asks what these fruits would taste like to someone with two brains, leaving Song Kami puzzled by the question. Meanwhile, Minun is in a meeting room, facing 3 large screens in a video call with 3 individuals. A bald man slams his fist on the desk, demanding to know if Minun thinks he can hide Jan forever. Minun forces a smile, replying that he isn't actively trying to hide January. Another man accuses Minun of lying, pointing out that he used 10% of South Korea's power without prior approval. He asks if all that energy was just for a conversation. Minun admits it, explaining that it was crucial to uncover Jan's past. The third man, intrigued, asks what exactly Minun discovered. Minun explains that the seed seems to have a peculiar attachment to January. The man interrupts, stating that he dislikes vague answers, showing Jan's photo and asking if he's the one. Displaying additional pictures, he dismisses Jan as nothing special. Min-nun urges the men to sense the potential Jan harbors. One of the men reminds Min-nun that their organization doesn't invest in keyholder candidates below a certain threshold. He adds that elite Special Forces agents have already been dispatched to test Jan's capabilities. The first man interrupts, announcing that the number of missing person cases has been rising lately. The others dismiss his claim, stating that disappearances happen all the time and aren't unusual. However, the first man clarifies that only brain-dead patients are going missing, which raises concerns. This revelation catches Min-dun's attention, and he begins to speculate aloud if the disappearances could be connected to a group he's familiar with. At that moment, Song Kami enters, informing Min-dun that Jan has already left for school. Jan strolls down the street, headphones on, with a light backpack on his shoulders, feeling a sense of freedom. It's been a while since Jan has become accustomed to seeing screens floating around people, but something feels off. He observes the surroundings more closely. After scanning the crowd, Jan realizes the screens are blank, showing no videos at all. Suddenly, 3 muscular men appear, surrounding Jan from all sides. Surprised, Jan asks if they need something from him. The men remain silent, and Jan recalls Song Kami's warning about potential threats targeting him. He remembers her advice to embrace his powers and grow stronger, rather than avoiding them. Song Kami had stressed the importance of feeding the seed, filling its stomach, and asserting dominance over it as its master. She also suggested Jan prepare a convincing reason to use his powers when the time came. Reflecting on her words, Jan wonders if being surrounded by these men is reason enough to act. Song Kami had described a scenario where Jan could convince the seed of his desire to survive when faced with an attack. Remembering her training, Jan decides to initiate symbiosis with the seed. Closing his eyes, he finds himself standing before dozens of floating screens. One of them asks if he wants to, like January. He stands firm, remaining silent as he stares at the 3 men surrounding him. These men are members of a special task force, a highly trained unit tasked with the most dangerous missions for the government. Among them is the Horn Unit, a specialized team chosen for their unmatched combat skills, focused on anti-superhuman operations. For the Horn Unit, taking down a high school student would be a simple, effortless mission. They might feel embarrassed by the easy task, yet one still kicks the sharp fruit kebab stick at January. Minoa steps in front of Jan, effortlessly catching the sharp stick midair. She turns to Jan and tells him to see how well the training he's undergone will hold up in real combat. Earlier, Minoa and Kami had discussed Jan's progress, noting how easily he could follow NoTube's videos. Minoa pointed out that the real challenge wasn't just following the videos, but understanding how, and to what extent, Jan could apply them. Kami gave a thumbs up, agreeing with Minoa's assessment, and adding that Jan had limitless potential and could adapt to the videos. The thought excited her immensely. Back in the present, Jan bends down, positioning himself with his hands on the ground, resembling a marathon start. The Horn Unit sneers, mocking Jan, wondering if he's trying to escape like a bullet. Jan propels himself forward, his feet crashing into one of the men's faces. The force of the hit is so immense that the man's teeth shatter and fly out, sending him crashing several feet away. The other 2 men stand in disbelief, completely stunned by Jan's speed and strength. Glancing at the men, Jan calmly says not to blame him, as they attacked first. The bald man charges at Jan from behind, hoping to catch him off guard, but Jan is too fast. Spinning around, he lands a powerful kick right into the bald man's face. The force of the kick causes the bald man's head to twist unnaturally. He groans in pain as his cheek slams into his mouth, cursing Jan in a fit of rage. Jan raises his leg high, adopting the stance of a Jeet Kune Do master. The bald man clenches his fists in anger, throwing punches at Jan, but Jan blocks some and dodges others, continuing to attack. The bald man mocks Jan, questioning if all he knows how to do is dodge. Clenching his fist, Jan thrusts it forward, landing a powerful blow to the bald man's backside. The punch knocks the wind out of him, and he stumbles, struggling to catch his breath. Saliva drools from his mouth as he realizes Jan is skilled in boxing. Jan finishes the fight with a precise uppercut that sends the bald man flying through the air. The bald man crashes to the ground with a loud thud, knocked unconscious. Wiping the sweat from his brow, Jan turns to the fallen man and apologizes, explaining that he's in a hurry to get to school. Witnessing all of this, the last remaining man feels his body freeze with fear, despite his own extensive training and strength. In a desperate attempt to turn the tide, the man pulls out a sharp knife, determined to prove that he won't lose to a high school student. He charges at Jan, thrusting the knife toward him, but Jan effortlessly sidesteps the attack, despite his speed. Jan feels a sharp sting as the knife grazes his cheek, leaving a small cut. Juan steps back, wiping the blood away, and realizes that he's reached a point where he no longer cares about the consequences. His eyes burn with intensity, as he vows that anyone who dares to cross him will not go unscathed. With newfound resolve, Jan charges at the man, raising his hand to strike. Using all his strength, Jan delivers a resounding slap to the man's face, distorting his features. This moment unfolds exactly as Cammy had planned, each step leading to this slap that seals the fight. Looking down at the three defeated men lying motionless on the ground, Jan slides his foot across the floor and strikes a celebratory pose, as if he had just won a gold medal. Watching the battle from across the road, a bulky man eating a fruit kebab calls Jan a defective product. His glare sharpens as Jan celebrates his victory, and through gritted teeth, the man mutters that Jan is a defective copy. He then quickly writes a report with his name and location, unaware that Jan is mocking his abilities. At school, Yunju freezes, her hands covering her mouth in shock at seeing Juan after so long. Leaning in closer, she demands to know why he's been absent for so long, and what he's been doing. Her gaze shifts to his bulging veins, and with a mix of curiosity and excitement, she eagerly asks if he's been working out nonstop. The other students turn to look at Jan, their faces filled with confusion as they struggle to recognize him. Mina sternly warns Jan not to cause any trouble and to ensure that everything is reported in detail. Shaking his head, Jan snaps back, promising her that he will report as instructed. Watching them, Yunju's expression darkens, a hint of jealousy crossing her face. Her thoughts spiral, and she begins to suspect that Juan and Mina may be secretly meeting outside of school. Meanwhile, Jan steps into an empty classroom to report the incident involving the strange men to Mahan and Cammy. Cammy curiously asks how it feels to be back at school after being away for so long. Jan hesitates but then responds with newfound confidence, saying it feels like a fresh start. Standing by the door, Minoa keeps an eye on the hallway, while Cammy warns Jan not to act recklessly. Mahan reminds him firmly to visit the teacher's office for any pending issues. Moments later, Jan heads to the teacher's office and is stunned when the teacher informs him that he has been selected to receive support from a prestigious scholarship foundation. Despite his average grades, the foundation believes in Jan's potential and will support him in his future endeavors. Adding to the surprise, the teacher reveals that a representative from the foundation made a specific request about Jan and hands him his life record. The teacher calmly tells Jan that he is free to make any changes he deems necessary. Jan's expression hardens as he takes the report, gripping the pen tightly and scribbling on the paper. Once finished, he rises, bows respectfully to the teacher, and walks out. The teacher examines the form closely and notices that Jan has erased "deceased" from the parents' column and replaced it with "searching." Back at headquarters, CI asks Mahan why he decided to send Jan back to school. Mahan pauses before explaining that it's only natural for Jan to experience a normal school life. He emphasizes that no matter how unique or different someone may be, deep down they are still students with the same rights as anyone else. He believes Jan should be allowed to enjoy the school experience, especially since he expressed a desire for a normal life. Cammy smirks, pointing out that Mahan has a talent for finding unusual people and encouraging them to pursue normal dreams. At the NEOC Connecting Organization's office, the doctor sits alone in his dimly lit office, poring over digital documents. Holding a pencil, he jots down notes, furiously, his focus unbroken as he sifts through extensive data. His movements stop as he stares in shock at a report calling Jan a defective product. Rising abruptly, he grabs his phone and dials a spy, coldly asking if Jan has been located. The spy, who had reported on Jan earlier that morning, confirms and adds that Jan is currently in contact with Scallops. When the doctor asks if the spy can handle the situation alone, the spy grits his teeth, vowing to settle the matter and calling Jan an ungrateful monkey in a venomous tone. The doctor enters a massive lab filled with rows of human pods, each connected to wires, giving off a sinister, mad scientist vibe. The pods contain unconscious humans, their lifeless faces suspended in eerie stillness. Wires link the humans inside the pods, and screens in front of each pod display sniper training videos. On a nearby table rests the seed of Yggdrasil, attached to a chip and held carefully by robotic arms. Another robotic arm, equipped with a drill, creates a precise hole in one of the men's temples, and the robotic arms insert the seed of Yggdrasil directly into the man's brain, completing the procedure. Suddenly, the man's eyes snap open, bloodshot and pulsating with bulging veins as alarms blare throughout the lab. Watching the chaotic scene unfold on a screen, the doctor smirks, muttering that there isn't much left to accomplish now. Shortly after, the system announces the success of the procedure, as all the test subjects fully integrate with the seed of Anil. Meanwhile, Jan is training hard, performing push-ups as his body glistens with sweat. As he reaches his 998th repetition, Minoa arrives, informing him of a new mission from headquarters. Jan continues doing push-ups while Minoa casually sits on his back, increasing the strain on his arms as she scrolls through her phone. Minoa explains that Scallops' radar has detected a nationwide issue involving missing brain-dead patients. Summoning all his strength, Jan completes his 100th push-up, causing Mina to leap off in surprise as Jan collapses onto the ground. Mina tells him that their mission is to investigate the disappearance of these patients. Panting heavily, Jan asks if the mission will be dangerous, tossing a towel onto his face. Minoa reassures him that it won't be anything too risky. She then holds up her phone and asks if Jan recognizes the person in a picture. Glancing at the photo, Jan identifies the man as the doctor and CEO of Neok Connecting. Minoa explains that Mahan suspects the missing patients are linked to Neok Connecting, and they need to dig deeper. Suddenly, Yuju arrives on the rooftop, curiously asking what they're doing. She grins, assuming they're exercising together. Ignoring her entirely, Minoa turns to Jan and says they'll start their mission after school. Turning back, Minoa sarcastically asks Yunju why she always follows them around like a lost puppy. Without waiting for an answer, Minoa walks past her and disappears down the stairs. Yunju approaches Jan, asking if he can help her with something. With a mischievous grin, Yunju reveals she's trying to film the trending superconductor dance and wonders if Jan knows it. Agreeing to help, Jan grabs her phone and starts filming as Yunju enthusiastically performs the dance steps. At an excavation site, the captain watches a new worker struggle and grumbles that if Jan were here, the job would already be done. Out of nowhere, a hand grabs the captain's shoulder, startling him. He spins around to find a large man standing behind him with a menacing expression. Wrapping an arm around the captain, the man cryptically asks if he knows what happens when someone loses their sight. Before the captain can respond, the man explains in a chilling tone how the body deteriorates over time. Confused and alarmed, the captain demands to know who the man is. Removing his glasses, the man reveals glowing, unnatural eyes and coldly instructs the captain to summon January. Later that afternoon, Yunju excitedly exclaims that her most recent dance video is racking up views. She walks alongside Jan and Mina on the sidewalk, chatting happily. Jan's phone suddenly rings, and he sees it's a call from the captain, whom he hasn't heard from in a long time. Stopping abruptly, Jan looks worried, prompting the girls to ask what's wrong. Tossing his bag aside, Jan shouts that the captain is in danger and sprints away. Mina chases after him, shouting that they don't have time to get sidetracked. Jan quickly shows her a photo on his phone of the captain beaten and lying on the ground. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Minoa curses under her breath and runs faster, watching them disappear into the distance. Yunju waves awkwardly, feeling left out as usual. Arriving at the site, Jan and Mina scan the area while catching their breath. Jan spots the captain lying unconscious a few feet away and immediately runs toward him. Minnow tries to stop him, but Jan lunges forward without hesitation. Out of nowhere, a large excavator speeds toward the captain, its claw poised to crush him. Acting quickly, Jan uses all his strength to drag the captain out of harm's way. As the dust settles, the spy steps out of the shadows, his massive frame towering over them. Jan demands to know who he is, but the man cryptically responds that Jan should already recognize him. The spy exudes a deadly aura, taunting Jan by saying he would know him if his eyes were gone. A wave of familiarity washes over Jan as he realizes the man is from the lab experiments. Turning his back to Jan, the man thanks him, claiming he replaced his eyes because of him. Raising his fist, the man releases a powerful shockwave that flips the excavator onto its side. Witnessing this display of raw power, Jan and Mina quickly realize he's no ordinary opponent. Shaking his hand loose, the man declares that he will now take Jan's eyes and the seed of Yggdrasil and plant it in his brain. Jan watches in silence as the man, engulfed in a deadly aura, remains unwavering in his stance. Seeing the grin on the man's face, Jan clenches his fist, feeling utterly sick of the situation. A surge of rage overtakes him as he thinks about being pursued like a lab dog, despite having done nothing to harm anyone. Gritting his teeth, he tells the man that he won't sit still anymore, prompting the man's grin to grow even wider. Maintaining his composure, Jan asks what he did wrong in the first place. Removing his glasses to reveal dark, piercing eyes, the man coldly declares that defective products like Jan need to be retrieved. Fed up with the talking, Jan dashes forward and delivers a powerful kick straight to the man's head. Using the techniques he learned during training, Jan follows up with a mid-air spin and lands another kick with his opposite leg. The man absorbs the full force of the kicks and is pushed backwards slightly. Jan is startled to see the man maintain his footing and stand upright, completely unharmed by both kicks. Like an X-ray machine, the man scans Jan, observing his internal organs and the seed of Yggdrasil within him as if through clear glass. Realizing the danger, Mina shouts out a warning to Jan about the man's eyes. Without warning, the man thrusts a fist forward, landing a devastating blow to Jan's face. He follows up immediately, punching Jan in the stomach with his other hand, lifting him off the ground. Grabbing Jan's hair like claws, the man unleashes a flurry of powerful punches directly at him. Jan, now battered, has his arms visibly damaged from trying to block the onslaught of blows. Not yet satisfied, the man raises his fist again, slamming Jan with a strike that sends him flying backward like a stone being thrown. Jan bounces off the ground and crashes with a loud thud, leaving an impact crater. Seeing Jan on the brink of defeat, Mina watches anxiously. The man strides toward Jan, raising his hand before lowering it to grab him once more. Sitting dazed on the ground, Jan groans in pain as smoke and dust swirl around him. Suddenly, Jan lunges upward, aiming a kick at the man, who dodges it with ease. Locking his hands around Jan, the man forcefully slams him into the ground with immense power, smirking as he towers over January. The man curses him and declares he's going to die. Blood drips from Jan's mouth as he lies on the ground, struggling to get up. The man grabs a fistful of sand and pours it onto Jan's eyes, making him cry out in agony. Feeling his eyes burning, Jan begins cursing loudly and groaning in pain. Towering over him, the man mocks Jan, telling him to feel the emotions he used to suppress. The man reminds Jan that, once upon a time, he cared for him deeply back in the lab. Jan had first met the man and asked for help with an injured ankle. Tears in his eyes, Jan had explained how he hurt himself while running. Acting like a caring brother, the man had taught Jan how to run safely and avoid falling. He had advised Jan not to run aimlessly, but to focus on his path, and Jan had thanked him. When the synchronization process between Jan and the seed of Yggdrasil began, the man had watched with visible worry. But after seeing the process succeed, the man had hugged Jan in relief before Jan collapsed from exhaustion. However, when the seed of Yggdrasil took over Jan's body, it attacked the man and destroyed his right eye. The man became blind as a result, left to suffer the consequences of that attack. Now, in the present, his eyes have been replaced with mechanical ones that allow him to see far beyond human limits. As the dust clears, Jan is kneeling while the man declares that the world is collapsing and needs to be rebuilt. Suddenly, Minoa charges from behind, attempting to strike the man. However, the man reacts swiftly and knocks Minoa back with a precise strike from his elbow. Minoa's eyes widen in shock as she stumbles backward, her arms trembling from the impact. Feeling her arms damaged, Minoa winces and realizes the man's strength is overwhelming. The man tells Jan he succeeded as an experiment because he lacked the strong ego that ruined others. He mocks Jan, recalling how he tried to appease the researchers, even when they poked around in his brain. As the man continues mocking him, he fails to notice the excavator's shovel descending rapidly from above. At the last moment, the man looks up just as the shovel crashes down on him, causing an explosive burst of debris. A minute earlier, a woman climbs onto the excavator and, taking a wild guess, begins pressing random buttons. Fortunately, she manages to start the machine and quickly figures out how to operate it. In a matter of seconds, she learns to maneuver the excavator's shovel and move its arm up and down. After mastering the controls, Cammy drives the excavator toward the man and strikes him from behind with the shovel. The sheer force of the blows sends the man flying backward, and he crashes to the ground several feet away with a loud swoosh. Witnessing the excavator suddenly spring into action and attack the villain, the people nearby are left stunned. Cammy pivots the excavator around and drives it directly toward the remaining men, who scramble and run for their lives. Just as the excavator abruptly halts, the fleeing men stop as well, letting out a collective sigh of relief. Jan watches intently, wondering who is controlling the machine. As Cammy steps out and boldly demands to know who dares to trouble him, Jan breaks into an excited smile, his face lighting up. As Cammy approaches, Jan bows his head and apologizes sincerely for acting recklessly on his own. Raising her hand as though to slap him, Cammy surprises Jan by gently stroking his cheek, offering comfort instead of anger. The spot where the man had crashed is now shrouded in a thick cloud of dust, rising ominously toward the sky. Clutching her injured arm, Mina explains that the villain is like a cyborg with strange eyes that allow him to see behind him. CI dismisses this, suggesting the man is using nearby CCTV cameras to enhance his vision rather than seeing backward. She then mentions she has already destroyed most of the surveillance cameras in the vicinity, pointing out the danger of staying. She advises they retreat to the base to regroup and come up with a new plan. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupts nearby, shaking the entire area and sending another plume of smoke into the air. Jan and the two girls stare in shock as the smoke begins to clear, revealing the shadowy outline of the man stepping fully into view. His glowing eyes pierce through the dust, his slightly damaged cyborg body radiating anger. Horrified by the sight, Cammy mutters that she has no particular interest in cyborgs. Realizing the imminent danger, Jan shouts a desperate warning for Cammy to run, just as the cyborg charges forward at blinding speed. Like swatting a fly, the cyborg grabs Cammy by the throat and hoists her off the ground with ease. Struggling in his grip, Cammy desperately tries to pry his hand away from her neck, but finds it impossible. Tightening his grip, the cyborg cruelly refers to her as an unexpected catch, his voice dripping with malice. Despite her dire situation, Cammy smirks and pulls out a round device, tossing it near the cyborg's feet. The device releases countless electric strands that surge around the cyborg, shocking him and causing him to groan in pain. However, his groans quickly turn to mocking laughter as he declares that the electric charge barely tickles him. Before Cammy can react, he punches her with his free hand, only for Mina to lunge at him from behind and kick him in the face. The cyborg retaliates instantly, extending his arm and grabbing Mina by the neck, locking her in his grasp. With both girls in his clutches, he slams their heads together with a sickening laugh. The brutal collision leaves both Cammy and Mina dazed, their mouths bleeding and their eyes closing as they nearly pass out. The cyborg roars with laughter. Witnessing the brutality, something inside Jan snaps as a flood of familiar helplessness overtakes him. His mind flashes back to the day of the car accident, when his mother was trapped inside and told him to run. A stranger had pulled him to safety just as the car exploded, killing his mother instantly. Haunted by that day, Jan has carried the weight of guilt, unable to forgive himself. Isolated and friendless, he's spent years struggling to escape the shadow of his past. Even after gaining powers, Jan's only desire was to lead a normal life like everyone else. But his fear of failure has always held him back, leaving him powerless in critical moments. This overwhelming guilt and helplessness threatened to consume him, spiraling his mind into darkness. He finds himself wishing he'd stayed in his room, escaping reality by watching no-tube videos. Just then, a motivational video appears on a screen, confronting the excuses people make as they waste their lives away. Cammy collapses to the ground, passing out, while Minoa, badly injured, struggles to stay conscious, unable to feel her face. The cyborg spots her movement, smirks, and delivers a powerful kick, calling it his finishing move. Minoa is sent flying, crashing to the ground a few feet away. As Jan rushes toward the cyborg, turning to confront him, the cyborg coldly remarks that it's best to kill a raised dog quickly and painlessly. Jan stands firm, but feels overwhelmed, labeling himself useless and no match for the cyborg's strength. Tears well up as his face contorts with hopelessness, making him want to give up. Suddenly, the voice of the motivational speaker echoes in Jan's mind, questioning whether his doubts are his real obstacle. In his mind's eye, the scene shifts to a vast snow-covered mountain range, the wind howling. Jan stands before the speaker, who asks if he is struggling. Shivering from the cold, Jan admits that fighting the cyborg feels impossible. The speaker asks if Jan is stuck in the past, unable to move forward and take action. Reluctantly, Jan agrees, only to be called a liar. The speaker accuses Jan of making excuses and avoiding responsibility. Frustrated, Jan shouts at the speaker, asking what he should do. The speaker turns around and replies that even he doesn't know the answer. Jan cries out, questioning why he alone must carry such a heavy burden and endure so much pain. The speaker calmly explains that Jan was chosen not as a coward, but as a hero, to save no-tube. Confused, Jan asks why he was chosen and what makes him different from anyone else. The speaker smiles and says it's because Jan genuinely cared for no-tube videos. Suddenly, Jan is flooded with memories of himself scrolling through countless no-tube videos, whether at breakfast, while sleeping, or even while changing clothes. No-tube was always part of his daily life. He recalls spending an entire month watching no-tube without stopping. The speaker calls him a hero for the platform and urges Jan to trust himself, accept the truth, and take action. Snapping back to reality, Jan stands before the cyborg, now filled with determination. Being called a hero shifts Jan's mentality, and he now stands unshaken and fearless. The cyborg raises his fists to strike, but Jan braces himself, prepared to counter. As the cyborg thrusts his fist forward, Jan unexpectedly thanks him, catching the cyborg off guard. The cyborg unleashes a barrage of punches, but Jan skillfully dodges. The cyborg demands to know why he's being thanked. Leaping high into the air, Jan performs a backflip, landing several paces away to maintain distance. Smiling confidently, Jan says the cyborg gave him the motivation he needed and mockingly gestures for him to attack. Enraged, the cyborg charges at Jan, vowing to tear him apart piece by piece. Focusing intently, Jan locks his gaze on the approaching cyborg and declares he knows how to defeat him. Raising two fingers, Jan thrusts them forward, piercing directly into the cyborg's eyes, his weak point. The cyborg screams in pain as his vision is destroyed and collapses to his knees, clutching his face. Wasting no time, Jan sprints toward a nearby excavator, formulating a plan to finish the fight. The captain realizes Jan's intentions and cheers him on, urging him to continue. With a powerful leap, Jan enters the excavator and prepares to demolish the cyborg completely. Swinging the excavator's shovel with force, Jan smashes the cyborg's body into countless shattered pieces. As the smoke clears, the cyborg's severed head lies amidst the rubble, his body destroyed. Not satisfied, Jan crushes the remaining parts of the cyborg into nothingness, leaving no trace behind. Witnessing their victory, The captain and the others cheer loudly, celebrating their hard-fought triumph. The next morning, before the sun rises, our hero wakes up first and begins preparing breakfast. However, the ingredients in the refrigerator aren't ideal. There are only eggs. But his motivation transcends the lack of materials. Moments later, we see him deep in his cooking, using all the knowledge he has to create various dishes from eggs. His drive comes from two strong motivations: 200 girls waiting to be fed and a deep frustration over his colleagues' injuries caused by him. After a short while, he presents them with a meal fit for royalty. When they see it, they can hardly believe how such delicious food could be made from just eggs. Nervously rubbing his head, he serves more to his injured colleagues, who had suffered because of him. Bon appetit, he says, and they begin eating. Struck by the taste, they declare that it's amazing. He's grateful and smiles, thinking to himself that eggs truly make the best breakfast. However, they aren't quite full and ask if dessert is coming soon. Meanwhile, the captured cyborg is strapped to a chair. Although he's lost his body, he can still feel pain. The leader of the organization approaches and whispers in his ear, opening a bottle of wine. He asks the cyborg what they're still doing in his brain, not understanding his situation. The cyborg remarks that the leader seems to have many questions, but he doesn't listen to his own requirements. The leader comments that the cyborg doesn't seem to understand his situation. If he's trying to negotiate, he won't succeed. The cyborg isn't sure if he's supposed to be a cyborg or just scrap metal, but he won't feel guilty about what's to come. The cyborg asks what the leader intends to do, incredulous that he thinks he'll open up so easily. The leader responds that it's not the machine he's breaking, but the mind. Moments later, the room fills with tension. Meanwhile, one of the girls reflects that she couldn't do much in the battle and feels the same as the other researcher. They try not to be too hard on themselves, knowing even the researchers didn't realize their technology was so advanced. She looks at her hands and decides she needs to become stronger, as her current state will only hold her colleagues back. The researcher comments that getting stronger means using better weapons, and she ponders the idea. Outside, our protagonist realizes it's time to go in. He wonders if he should just open the door, but the serious atmosphere inside makes him hesitate. Suddenly, his phone rings, and after a moment, he leaves the bug on the door, stepping out to meet the leader. The leader asks if he's had any rest. Our protagonist apologizes for what happened before, acknowledging the injuries his team suffered because of him. However, the leader reassures him that he's not to blame. If anyone is responsible for not predicting the attack, it's the leader himself. The leader shares that he was able to gather some useful information from interrogating the cyborg. Despite its broken mind, they now have intel. They were able to secure the seed, but the cyborg's abilities are greater than their own, so they're expecting an even more dangerous situation ahead. As a result, they've decided to bring in reinforcement from Scallops, those in charge of the bottle of scallops. Among them is one person perfectly suited for the job. Meanwhile, in the ocean, a helmet slowly surfaces. A man's hand emerges, looking towards a distant place, preparing for an operation. We see the man turning away from the fire and declaring that they seem to be discussing a trainee. He'll have to return soon, as it's been a while since he's been back to his hometown. This is Scallops' comeback agent, John Hyen-woo,